From translation, ISV International Standard Version, this 138th day of the year, today we are reading passages 2 Chronicles 28-31, 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 1 to 27. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. He did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord his God, as his ancestor David had done. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and even made cast images for the Baals. He burned incense in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and sacrificed his children in the fire, imitating the detestable practices of the nations that the Lord had driven out ahead of the Israelites. He also offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. Therefore the Lord his God delivered him into the hand of the king of Aram. They defeated him, and carried off a great number of captives to Damascus. He was also delivered into the hand of the king of Israel, who defeated him, and inflicted heavy casualties on him. For Rezin king of Aram and Pekah son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to wage war against Jerusalem. They besieged Ahaz but could not overcome him. At that time Rezin king of Aram recovered Elath for Aram, and drove the people of Judah from Elath. The Arameans came to Elath, and they live there to this day. Ahaz took the silver and gold that was in the Lord's temple and in the treasuries of the king's house, and sent them as a tribute to the king of Assyria, but it did not help him. The king of Aram and the king of Israel defeated a great army of Judah, because they had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Then the prophet Oded met him and said, "Look, because the Lord, the God of your ancestors, was angry with Judah, he delivered them into your hand, but you have slaughtered them in a rage that reaches up to heaven. Now you are planning to make the people of Judah and Jerusalem your slaves. But aren't there already among you enough sinners from among Judah? Listen to me and return the captives you took from your brothers, because the fierce wrath of the Lord is against you." Then some of the leaders of the Ephraimites, Azariah son of Johanan, Berechiah son of Meshillemoth, Jehizkiah son of Shallum, and Amasa son of Hadlai, stood up against those who were coming from the war. They said to them, "You must not bring the captives here, because we are guilty against the Lord. Do you intend to add to our sins and guilt? Our guilt is already great, and there is fierce anger against Israel." So the soldiers left the captives and the plunder before the leaders and the entire assembly. Then the men who were designated by name got up and took the captives. From the plunder they clothed all who were naked, gave them sandals, food and drink, and provided them with medical care. They put the weak on donkeys, and brought them to their Jericho, the city of palms, and to their brothers. Then they returned to Samaria. At that time King Ahaz sent to the kings of Assyria for help. The Edomites had again come and attacked Judah and carried away captives. The Philistines had also raided the cities of the foothills and the Negev of Judah, and had taken Beth-Shemesh, Ajalon, Gederoth, Soko, Timnah and Gimzo, with their villages. They settled there. The Lord had humbled Judah because of Ahaz king of Israel, for he had encouraged Judah to sin. Then Tilgath-Pilneser king of Assyria came to him, but he gave him trouble instead of help. Ahaz stripped the Lord's temple, the royal palace, and the officials' houses, and gave the silver and gold to the king of Assyria, but it did not help him. In his time of distress, King Ahaz became even more unfaithful to the Lord. He sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, who had defeated him, and said, "Since the gods of the kings of Aram helped them, I will sacrifice to them, so they will help me." But they were his downfall and the downfall of all Israel. Ahaz gathered together the furnishings of God's temple and cut them into pieces. He shut the doors of the Lord's temple and made altars for himself in every corner of Jerusalem. In every city of Judah he built high places to burn incense to other gods, and provoked the Lord, the God of his ancestors, to anger. The rest of the acts of Ahaz, his ways, and what he did, are they not written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel? Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of Jerusalem, but not in the tombs of the kings of Israel. His son Hezekiah succeeded him as king. 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 1 to 36. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord, just as his ancestor David had done. In the first month of the first year of his reign, he opened the doors of the Lord's temple and repaired them. He brought in the priests and the Levites and assembled them in the square on the east side. He said to them, "Listen to me, Levites. Now consecrate yourselves and consecrate the Lord's temple of God. Remove all defilement from the sanctuary. For our fathers were unfaithful and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord our God. They abandoned him, they turned away their faces from the Lord's dwelling place, and they turned their backs on him. They also shut the doors of the portico and put out the lamps, did not burn incense or burnt offerings in the sanctuary to the God of Israel." Then the Levites stood up. Mahath son of Amasai, and Joel son of Azariah from the descendants of Kohath, and Kish son of Abdi, and Zechariah son of Jehiel from the descendants of Merari, and Jo son of Zimmer, and Eden son of Jo from the descendants of Gershom. From the descendants of Elizaphan, Shimri and Jewel, and from the descendants of Asaph, Zechariah and Mattaniah, and from the descendants of Heman, Jehuel and Shimei, and from the descendants of Jeduthun, Shemaiah and Uzziel. The priests went into the inner part of the Lord's temple to purify it, and they brought out all the uncleanness they found in the Lord's temple to the courtyard of the Lord's temple. Then the Levites received it to carry it out to the Kidron Valley. They began to consecrate on the first day of the first month, and on the 8th day of the month they came to the portico of the Lord. Then they consecrated the Lord's temple for 8 days, and on the 16th day of the first month they finished. Then they went in to King Hezekiah and said, "We have purified the entire temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the table for the showbread with all its utensils." Then King Hezekiah got up early and assembled the city officials, and went up to the Lord's temple. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats for a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. Then he ordered the descendants of Aaron, the priests, to offer them on the altar of the Lord. So they slaughtered the bulls, and the priests received the blood, and sprinkled it on the altar. Then they slaughtered the rams, and sprinkled their blood on the altar. They also slaughtered the lambs, and sprinkled their blood on the altar. Then they brought the male goats for the sin offering before the king in the assembly, and they laid their hands on them. The priests then slaughtered them, and made atonement for them with their blood on the altar, to make atonement for all Israel, because the king had commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering be made for all Israel. The Levites stood with the musical instruments of David, and the priests had trumpets. Then Hezekiah gave the order to offer the burnt offering on the altar. When the burnt offering began, the song to the Lord began, and the trumpeters sounded. All this continued until the burnt offering was completed. The whole assembly bowed in worship, while the singers played and the trumpeters sounded. All this continued until the burnt offering was completed. When they had finished making the offering, the king and all who were with him bowed down and worshipped. Then King Hezekiah and the officials told the Levites to praise the Lord with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. So they praised with joy and bowed down and worshipped. Hezekiah said, "Now that you have consecrated yourselves to the Lord, come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings to the Lord's temple." So the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all who were willing brought burnt offerings. The number of the burnt offerings that the assembly brought was 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 lambs, all for burnt offerings to the Lord. The consecrated offerings were 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep, but there were not enough priests to skin all the burnt offerings, so their Levite brothers helped them until the work was finished, and until the priests had consecrated themselves. The Levites had been more conscientious in consecrating themselves than the priests had been. Besides the burnt offerings, there were the fat portions of the peace offerings and the drink offerings for the burnt offerings. So the service of the Lord's temple was restored. Then Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced because of what God had done for the people, because the matter had been accomplished so quickly. 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verses 1 to 27. Hezekiah sent word throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, inviting them to come to the Lord's temple in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. The king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem decided to celebrate the Passover in the 2nd month. They had not been able to celebrate it at the regular time because not enough priests had consecrated themselves and the people had not gathered themselves together in Jerusalem. The plan seemed good to the king and to the whole assembly. So they sent a proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, inviting them to come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. For the people had not celebrated it in large numbers as prescribed. The couriers went throughout Israel and Judah with letters from the king and his officials, which read, "O people of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, so that he may return to those of you who have escaped and have not been destroyed by his fierce anger." The couriers went from city to city throughout Ephraim and Manasseh, as far as Zebulun, but they were mocked and laughed at. Nevertheless, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. Also in Judah, the hand of God was on the people to give them unity of purpose to carry out the king's order, despite the fact that a large assembly had gathered. So they celebrated the Passover in the 2nd month, with a large assembly of people who had gathered in Jerusalem. They removed the altars that were in Jerusalem, and they removed the incense altars, and threw them into the Kidron Valley. Then they slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the 2nd month. The priests and the Levites were ashamed, so they consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings to the Lord's temple. They took their regular posts according to the law of Moses. The priests splashed the blood that the Levites handed to them. Since many in the assembly had not consecrated themselves, the Levites had to slaughter the Passover lambs for everyone who was not clean, and to dedicate them to the Lord. For a large number of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not purified themselves, yet they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, "May the Lord, who is good, pardon everyone who sets his whole heart on seeking the Lord, the God of his ancestors, even though he is not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary." The Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. The Israelites who were present in Jerusalem celebrated the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days with great joy. The Levites and priests praised the Lord day after day, with loud instruments dedicated to the Lord. Hezekiah encouraged all the Levites who showed good understanding of the Lord. For 7 days they ate the appointed festival offerings and confessed the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Then the whole assembly decided to celebrate the festival for 7 more days, so they celebrated for 7 days with joy. King Hezekiah of Judah provided 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep for the assembly, and the officials provided 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep. A large number of priests consecrated themselves. The whole assembly of Judah rejoiced, including the priests, the Levites, and all who had come from Israel, including the foreigners who had come from Israel and those who lived in Judah. There was great joy in Jerusalem, because since the days of Solomon son of David, king of Israel, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem. Then the priests and Levites stood and blessed the people, and the Lord's presence was among them as they blessed the people. 2 Chronicles chapter 31, verses 1 to 21. When all this was finished, all Israel who were present went out to the cities of Judah and smashed the sacred pillars, cut down the Asherah poles, and tore down the high places and the altars throughout Judah and Benjamin, as well as in Ephraim and Manasseh. Then they returned to their own cities. Hezekiah reorganized the Levite divisions according to their duties, each Levite assigned to his work of ministering, offering burnt offerings, and presenting peace offerings and thank offerings to the Lord, and to give thanks and praise to him in the gates of the Lord's camp. He provided for the burnt offerings that were to be offered to the Lord morning and evening, the grain offerings and the drink offerings, and the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed feasts as written in the law of the Lord. He told the people living in Jerusalem to give the portion due to the priests and Levites, so they might devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the command was spread out, the people of Israel brought in abundance the firstfruits of grain, wine, oil, honey, and all the produce of the field. They brought a tithe of everything. The people of Israel and Judah who lived in the cities of Judah also brought in the tithe of their herds and flocks, and the tithe of the holy things that were consecrated to the Lord their God, and they piled them up in heaps. In the 3rd month they began to pile up the heaps, and they finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and his officials came and saw the heaps, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel. Hezekiah questioned the priests and Levites about the heaps. Azariah the chief priest from the family of Zadok answered him, "Since the people began to bring the offerings to the Lord's temple, we have had enough to eat and have plenty left over, because the Lord has blessed his people. This abundance is what we have left over." Hezekiah ordered them to prepare storerooms in the Lord's temple, and they prepared them. They faithfully brought in the offerings, the tithes, and the dedicated gifts. Chenaniah the Levite was in charge of them, and his brother Shimei was second in command. Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahas, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahas, and Benaiah were supervisors under Chenaniah and Shimei their brother, by the appointment of King Hezekiah and Azariah the chief priest of the house of Zadok. Korah son of Imnah the Levite, the doorkeeper at the east, was in charge of the voluntary offerings of God, to distribute the contributions for the Lord and for the most holy things. Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah, in the cities of the priests, distributed faithfully to their brothers according to their divisions, old and young alike. In addition, they distributed to the males enrolled by genealogy, 3 years old and older, to all who went to the Lord's temple for their daily portions, as prescribed for each by their service to God. They also distributed to the priests enrolled by their families, and to the Levites 20 years old and older, according to their responsibilities. They included all who were enrolled by genealogy, to the little ones, to the great, to the wives, and to everyone in Israel who had dedicated himself to the Lord. They distributed to them by divisions the portion due to the priests and Levites, and they also gave the dedicated gifts to all the little boys and the girls, and to the whole assembly of Israel as an inheritance, in the cities of their possession. So Hezekiah did throughout Judah, and he did what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God. In everything that he undertook in the service of God's temple and in obedience to the law and the commands, he sought his God and worked wholeheartedly, and so he prospered.